Welcome back. In this video, I'm just going to talk about how the asset allocation ETFs, or the all-in-one ETFs, performed in 2024. 2024 was a fantastic year, and that's back-to-back years that the S&P 500 has done really well. And it's always good to go back and look at your portfolio and see how it compared and if you can make any changes. And these asset allocation ETFs are a great way to do that. To show you how the asset allocation ETFs did, I'm going to use BMO's portfolio comparison tool. This is a fantastic site. It's great for comparisons, and I will link it below if you are interested in using this. And to start with, I'm just going to use the EQTs, the all equity portfolios. This is your XEQT from iShares, VEQT from Vanguard, and ZEQT from BMO. And you can see their MERs here are all quite low. VEQT is slightly higher, but not enough to worry about at all. You can see the inception dates. These are very new ETFs. You can see ZEQT isn't even 2 years old at the time of this recording. And if we scroll down to the performance here, you can see starting at their common inception date that the portfolios all did very similar in comparison to one another, as they're built very similarly. And if we click on the YTD, the year to date, you can see that, again, they're very similar, with a slight drop off of XEQT here in December, and Vanguard trailed through June and July a little bit maybe, but in the end, it came out near the top. And the numbers show that it was indeed a very good year for these ETFs. And you can see XEQT had 23.7% over the year, VEQT had 24.9% over the year, and ZEQT had 25.0% over the year. And the slight differences is in their slight differences in their asset allocations, and we'll go through that in 1 second. And you can see the 5-year, that's as far as the data really shows for these because of how new they are. That XEQT and VEQT have performed very similar over that stretch, 11.5% versus 11.6%. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see their asset allocations, and you can see that ZEQT has slightly higher allocation to the US, and that led to the higher performance, the slightly higher performance overall over the year. The US market did outperform all the other markets basically, so if you have a higher allocation to the US, then you did very well. But overall, these portfolios are built fairly similarly. And you can see the sector breakdown of each. You can see that technology had the highest sector allocation for XEQT and ZEQT. And again, because ZEQT has a higher allocation to the US, that's going to lead to a higher allocation in technology. And again, that's one of the reasons it did slightly outperform the other two, is because of its slightly higher allocation to the technology sector. And you can see here the geographical regions, and they're all, again, very similar. And here are the ETFs that each of these asset allocation ETFs are made up of. So again, a great year for the all equity portfolios, 23.7, 24.9, and 25% through the year. Let's look at the GROWs, the XGROW, VGROW, and ZGROW. And these are going to be your 80-20 portfolios, 80% in equity and 20% in bonds. So you're adding a little bit of safety to these portfolios. Again, these MERs are quite low, and you can see the inception dates are a little older than the all equity portfolios, still not very old, so there's not too much data behind all of these. You can see XGROW does have a little more data behind it because it was created in 2007. So if we scroll to the performance here, you can see since the common inception, they're again very, very similar. Year to date is what we're looking at today, and you can see again very, very similar with XGROW with that slight dip in December, and the numbers behind them over the year. XGROW 19.7%, VGROW at 20.2%, and ZGROW at 20.5%. And again, ZGROW did outperform slightly because of its higher allocation to the US. And you can see here, it is a slightly higher allocation to the US than the other countries. So let's look at someone who's a little more conservative. Let's look at the BALs, the XBAL, VBAL, and ZBALs. These are your 60-40 balanced portfolios. Again, many financial advisors will recommend a balanced portfolio. You want to have a little bit extra safety in case the market turns. And if you have a higher allocation to your bonds like these do, 40% in bonds, then your portfolio will drop less than something with an all equity. And again, your MERs are low and your inception date is not very old. Your common inception date, very similar amongst these three. You can see a slight lead for XBAL maybe. And the YTD, the year to date, is very similar for these three. And the numbers show that. You can see XBAL is at 14.9%, VBAL is 15.6%, and ZBAL is 15.9% over the year. You can see the 3-year and the 5-year are very similar. For the 5-year, 7.2, 7, and 7.1. So basically, it doesn't matter which one you choose, they are very similar. So no matter what risk tolerance you have, you had a very good 2024. So I just wanted to compare the 3 different ETFs, the 100-0, the 80-20, and the 60-40. And I've decided to just use Vanguard's 3 portfolios. So you can see here from the common inception that the all equity portfolio has outperformed, and it will. In the long run, the more equity you have, the greater your returns will be. But you can see here in January 20, when there is a market fall, and later on, near 2021, this is the reason that people do have their bonds. When there's a market collapse, the all equity will fall further than a portfolio with bonds in it. I always tell my students, I want you to be 100% equity, 0% bonds. But I know that's not the reality. Some of you are fearful of market crashes, and if it's going to make you sell, then don't get a 100-0 portfolio. Play it safer, do a 60-40. The bonds are there to prevent you from selling when the market goes down. And you can see in the long run, it's always going to go up, but what's going to prevent you from selling when it does go down? Because it is going to go down. You can see the differences here. So 24.9% over 1 year compared to 20.2 and 15.6. And over a longer time frame, the 5-year here, which is as far as these go, 11.6 compared to 9.3 compared to 7%. That 2%, that 4% is going to be significant over the long term. But again, choose the portfolio that will prevent you from selling in a downturn. Now, what if you're like me? What if you've broken up these? So when I started investing, these asset allocation ETFs weren't around. And so I like to benchmark my portfolio to the asset allocations. So I generally have 50% in the US market, 25% in the Canadian market, and 25% in the international market. So again, I'm just going to use Vanguard's index ETFs to showcase what my potential returns would have been. So you can see that I've used VFV for the US portion, VCN for the Canadian portion, and VIU for the international portion. And you can see from the common inception here that the US has been outperforming the rest of the world, basically. Canada has performed fairly well over that time. International markets have also performed well, just not as well as Canada and the US markets. Our year to date showcases that. The US market is up over 30%, Canadian markets over 20%, and international up over 10%. I mean, 10% is still really good. It just happened to be less than the 30 and the 20. And you can see the 1-year returns, 35.2% for the US, 22.3% for the Canadian, and 11.4% for the international. And longer term, up to the 5-year, 16.5%, 11.2%, and 6.3%, which are all really good returns over the last 5 years. And going back to the 1 year, if you had a 50% VFV, 25% VCN, and 25% VIU, then your returns would have been about 26.025%. Now my portfolio went up about 25%, so it's a little lower than that benchmark. And the reason is that I'm basically doing some dollar cost averaging. I get paid each month, so I put a little money in January and February and March and April and so on. And so I'm buying ETFs at a higher price than they were in January. If I could have convinced my employer to give me a lump sum at January and invested it all then, I would have been happy. I would have been up that 26% rather than 25%, but I have no control over that. So if I was to benchmark my portfolio, I am an all equity investor. So I would go to the all equity asset allocation ETFs, and you can see my 25% return is right on par with some of these asset allocation ETFs. I have no need to change my strategy. So if you've enjoyed this video and would like to stay informed of some of my other ones, please subscribe below and have a wonderful day.